play many games. We're a board game family, board games, cards, things like that. And we've gotten to where we bring, when we're ready to have a game night, of course we got, something's generally going on Sunday night, and we got small group on Monday night, and then we have Tuesday at home maybe, we got Wednesday night church, and then we're with somebody else. So we're busy all the time. So when we do get a night that we're home alone, it's generally going to be a Tuesday night. I've gotten to where I'll just bring a board game or a deck of cards or something to the table, because we were doing this thing where, like, when we get done, like, what game are we going to play? And that's 30 minutes. And I'm like, I'm just going to pick the game, and I'm going to bring it to the table, and we're going to finish eating. We'll play the game, and then I'll be irritated when we're done, and everybody can just go clean the kitchen, and that's how it's going to be. And that's the wrong set of slides. That's last week. All right, so we do those things. Y'all are just going to have to use your Bibles the old-fashioned way today. We do those things, and it's a lot of fun. But we have house rules. Anybody have house rules with your games? Some of them don't really lend themselves to house rules. Uno has a lot of house rules. With Uno, you got questions to ask. Like, if you can't play, how many cards do you have to draw? Well, that's a house rule if you keep drawing or you just draw one. Can you stack? Raise your hand if you can stack on a draw two. Can you stack? Yeah, we got some dirty players in here. We stack on a draw two, stack on a draw four, but you can't mix, right? You got to have stack only on draw two or draw four. You get rules like that. How do you use a reverse if there's only two players, right? You got to have house rules to decide how that's going to work. We have lots of house rules, and I learned about house rules when I was a kid from playing Monopoly. And I don't play Monopoly anymore because anybody I would want to play Monopoly with, I value the relationship too much to play Monopoly with them. But we had this house rule when I was a kid, and I just thought everybody did this, where when you pay, any money that you have to pay in that doesn't go directly to a person goes in the middle of the board. And then if you land on free parking, whoever lands on free parking gets the money. Some of y'all play that way. That's not in the rules. That's not how that's supposed to work. House rules are fine as long as everybody understands how you're playing. And what goes wrong is when you've got two households that come together to play, but they have different sets of house rules. And then you have to decide, well, this way is right or this way is right. Neither of them are right. It's just, this is how I want to do it. House rules are fine in games as long as everybody's on the same page. But we live in a world that seems to have a set of house rules that we cannot play by. Maybe you dealt with this at work. And the house rules at work, let's just use work as the example. The house rules at work are win and don't get caught, right? Whatever you do is okay as long as you don't get caught and you win, right? Some of y'all deal with that. You got bosses that they're decent people, but if they find a way to get a bigger bonus by taking advantage of you, they're going to take it, right? As long as they don't get caught. You work with people that are, maybe they're at the same level as you and you're both going for the same promotion, you're both going for a raise, whatever it is, or they're just tearing you down just for the future. And they will do whatever they can to destroy you. And it's like it doesn't even bother people. It's like these are the house rules, this is how we play, and if I win and you lose and you get destroyed, you lose your job, you get laid off, that's just your fault for not playing the game as well as I did. That's the thing we seem to be in. Maybe it's not work for you. Maybe you got family members that they are playing under the same kind of rules. And they come to you and they say, I need to borrow this, or I need that, or I'll take care of this. And you know from past history, they're not going to do what they said they're going to do. And they feel like you're just a sucker and it's your fault for being a sucker. And you go along with them, but they're playing by different rules than you are. And we as followers of Jesus have to play by a certain standard. We play by a certain standard. We keep our word. We're honest. We do our job. We look for the good of other people. When we're in a leadership position, we lead for their good, not for our own. We do these things. And everybody else is playing by a different set of rules. And it seems like we are in a position where we have to decide, it seems this way, are we going to play by the house rules and lose? Or are we going to play by the rules of Jesus and lose? Or are we going to play by the house rules and disobey Jesus? Which one's it going to be? That seems like those are our only two options. But Those are not our only two options. And today, we're going to look at a story about a guy named Jacob, the guy that we've been going through for a while. We're going to look at his story, and we're going to see the situation that he was in. His father-in-law is playing by house rules. He's not. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to keep his word. But the end result is different than you would expect it to be. The end result works out in a way that you might not expect. So we're going to be in Genesis chapter 30. And being in Genesis chapter 30, we're going to recap the story just a little bit. Let's go with stage right. Let's see if we can do this. See if I can take over. I don't know if I can or not. Hey, will you grab the Roku remote and press the middle button on that to let it allow me to do whatever I want to do? There we go. All right, so where we are in this story, Jacob has played by house rules for most of his life, right? He had a chance with his brother. Oh, there we go. He had a chance to work things out with his brother, and instead he took advantage of his brother. His brother wasn't playing by the same rules he was. He took advantage of him. He gets a chance with his dad to do the right thing, but instead he steals from his brother and lies to his dad. He plays by house rules. And at the end of that, he decides, you know what, I have destroyed my life because of this. And God meets with him, and God says, look, I want to be your God, and you be mine. And he doesn't really get it, but he decides from that point that he's going to be different. So he runs away from home because he's about to be murdered. And when he gets to this other place where the rest of his extended family is, he gets there, he meets his uncle Laban. And his uncle Laban is a Monopoly player, right? He does not care about relationships, he cares about winning. He will play and he will win, and he feels fine about that. So he meets Laban and he says, hey, I want to marry your daughter. This is the whole reason that I came up here, was to marry somebody. She's the right qualifications and she looks real good. I want to marry her. And Laban says, okay, you can marry her, but you have to work for 7 years to pay the bride price. So Jacob works for 7 years, and he's so in love that it seems like it's not even a day, that 7 years. He's so in love, he doesn't bother to check who's in his tent that night when they sign the marriage agreement. Let the reader understand. Like when he does that, he doesn't check to see who's in his tent. And it turns out he signed a marriage agreement with Leah. He gets mad the next morning when he figures it out, goes outside, says to his uncle Laban, what are you doing? And Laban says, house rules, man. This is how we play around here. The older sister gets married first. You should have checked to see what the rules are before you did that. Figured you would understand, but you didn't. So tell you what, we'll play again. This time, you work for 7 more years, and I'll let you marry the girl I actually promised you the first time. So he works for 7 more years to get to the end of the 14 years, and that's where we are today. In Genesis chapter 30, verse 25, we're right at 14 years. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me away that I may go to my own home and country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you. Jacob says, we are at the end of 14 years. I have kept my word. I'm out. But he's real concerned about Laban. He's really concerned that Laban is not going to let him leave, at least not with his wives and children. Laban was happy to sell his daughters, but that doesn't mean he's going to give them up unless he has to. Laban there's no police to go to, there's no government to go to. Laban is king in his house. And Laban wants his daughters and grandchildren. And more than that, he wants Jacob to keep working for him. And Jacob is really concerned that Laban would let him leave, but not take his wives and children with him, that he would use them as a bargaining chip to keep Jacob there. And so Jacob says, look, we're done. I've kept my word. You've not kept your word. Doesn't really matter. 14 years is up. Let me leave, please. I just want to go. But in verse 27, Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your sight, and that's a ridiculous thing to say, right? You know, I'm a pretty good guy. I feel like I'm a pretty good guy. I've treated you well these last 14 years. I've given you a place to live. I've let you marry my daughters. I'm a pretty good guy. And I think I deserve something from you. You notice that people who are playing with house rules at work or in your family, however it is, they never see themselves as the bad guy in the situation. Like, I'm just playing by the rules, man. It's your fault that you're not good at the game. I'm a good person. You're just bad at the game. He says, I'm a good boss. I'm a good father-in-law. I've let you live here with me for free. I've given you my daughters. And I think you owe me something. So if I have found favor in your sight, and I think I should have. You know the anger that comes with that, right? When the person that's cheated you and lied to you and taken advantage of you because you're trying to do the right thing acts like they're the good person in the situation. You know that? He says, if I have found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Name your wages, and I will give it. He says, God has told me that you are the only reason that I'm doing as well as I am. I've gone from poor to rich while you've been here, and I don't want you to leave. And I think I've earned some consideration. So tell me what you want to get paid, and I will give you what you want. Verse 29, Jacob says to him, you yourself know how I've served you. He's very polite to father-in-law. He's very polite. You yourself know how I've served you and how your livestock has fared with me. For you had little before I came, and it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. But now when shall I provide for my own household? He said, look, you know that I've worked, and I've taken care of you. I've slept outside in the heat and in the cold. I've taken care of your animals. I've protected your animals. I've fought off bears. I've fought off lions. I've fought off wolves. I've done these things for you. And you have gotten rich while I've been here. But I am flat broke, bro. 14 years and I hadn't got paid once. I got 2 kids, 2 concubines, or 2 wives, 2 kids. Oh man. Miss Linda, you may have to do this. 2 kids, 2 concubines, 12 children. He's got 11 boys and 1 girl. He's still got 1 boy coming on the way he doesn't know about yet. I have got about 12 kids, 4 women to take care of, and I have not been paid in 14 years. I have nothing while you have gotten rich. You felt that way? Right? Boss just keeps taking vacations and buying cars and buying boats and buying houses, and you can barely pay the bills. And he takes advantage of you. They take advantage of you. And you're trying to do the right thing, but they keep playing by house rules, and you get to the end of 14 years and you have nothing. Nothing. Laban says, fine. Verse 31. What do you want? What do I give you? Now, this is a trap, and Jacob knows it's a trap. Because, like we would think, we'll just start paying him an hourly wage. That was not a thing that they did. They did not have cash, okay? They might have some gold, they might have some things like that, but the wealth was all in livestock and land. That's where wealth is. You don't get paid, and they don't have employees. Either you have sons that work for you, in which case they don't get paid, right? They don't get paid, they get an inheritance. They get to eat, they get to live with the family, but they don't get paid. If you need some money, if you need to do your own thing, you have to go to dad and ask. Remember the story of the prodigal son? The prodigal son, the older brother says, hey, you've done all this stuff for the younger guy. You haven't done anything for me. I don't have anything. I can't even go out and have a party with my friends because I have nothing. And dad says, what? All you had to do is ask me and I would give it to you because there's no payment. A son receives an inheritance and room and board. That's what the son gets. There are no employees. There are servants. And servants become servants in one of 2 ways. Either you are a slave that's captured because of war and you're brought back, or you're someone who owes somebody money and you have to sell yourself to pay the debt. So let's say you're an enterprising young shepherd, but you have no sheep. You go to a rich guy like Laban, you say, hey, I want to start my own enterprise here, but I need to borrow some sheep. I'm going to take care of those sheep. They're going to have more sheep. I will pay you back so many sheep every year until I've paid you back at the end of this agreement, and then I'll have my own thing. And that's a risky proposition because sheep die, right? Sheep die. There are wolves, there are lions, there are bears, oh my, all these things. We've got things to watch out for, and then there's just sickness. So you borrow some sheep from Laban, and you say, hey, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm going to pay you back in interest, sheep interest. I'll give you these extra sheep. And Laban says, cool, gives you those sheep, and you go do that. Except then your sheep die, and you still have to pay it back. So what happens? You sell your kids, you sell your wife, you sell yourself, and they become servants. Servants don't get paid. Either they work until the debt is paid, and then they get to go free, or they are servants for their entire lives, however that works out. Nobody draws an hourly wage. There are no 1099s. There are no W-2s. You either get an inheritance or you are property. That's how that works. But Jacob is in this weird category where he is family, but he's not going to get an inheritance. He gets no pay. And up until this point, his pay has been the bride price for his 2 wives. And so Laban says, okay, there's not a concept of payment here. There's not a concept of an hourly wage. So tell you what, I will give you a present and we'll call it even. Tell me what you want. And this is a trap because one of 2 things will happen if Jacob says yes to this. One, he will agree to work for another period of years for payment of some size flock of sheep. In which case, he knows that Laban will cheat him. Because he's done it the last 2 times, right? He has cheated him before. He will cheat him again. Or, if Jacob refuses that, Laban can give him a gift for all the work that he's done over the last 14 years. In which case, Laban, the crook, the guy playing by house rules, will get to tell everybody how gracious and generous he is, that anything Jacob says about him is a lie. Just look at the gift that I gave him. And the bad guy will get to look like a good guy, while the good guy will look like a mooch. That's what's going to happen. Right? You know how infuriating that is? To have the person that has taken advantage of you and cheated you get to walk around justifiably and talk about how much they've done for you. That's just, I'd rather have nothing. Right? And these are the 2 options that Laban offers. And Jacob says, no, we ain't doing that, man. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to commit to another 7 years and then you cheat me at the end of that. We're going to invent a new method of payment. Here's what we're going to do. Jacob says, you will not give me anything. Here's what you're going to do for me. If you'll do this for me, I will pasture your flock and keep it. Here's what the agreement. I will stay and work for you and take care of your flocks, and you'll keep getting rich like you've been getting while I've been working for you. But let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, they shall be my wages. I'm going to get paid every foaling season. This is how it's going to work. Every time the sheep and the goats have their babies, we're just going to go through. And the speckled, the spotted, the black ones are going to be mine. Why did he want those? Well, he knew that Laban would agree to that more than he would agree to the other, because they're worth less. You can't dye black wool, okay? Speckled and spotted goat skins are worth less money because you can't do things with them as much, as easily. But also they're rare. The breeds of sheep that they have breed pretty true and solid colors. And so they're going to have less of those. So he says, I know that there are going to be less of these and they're less valuable. I just want something of my own. And Laban says, oh yeah, let's do that. First of all, you're getting the bad end of the deal. Second of all, I have a plan to make sure this doesn't work out anyway. So he agrees to this. And in verse 33, Jacob says, my honesty will answer for me later. When you look into my wages with you, you're going to be able to tell whether I cheated you or not, okay? You just come look at my flocks. If I've got any white sin in there, then you know that I cheated you. That's how this works. And you're not going to be able to say to your neighbors or your allies or your people that I cheated you. This is how this is going to work. Everyone that's not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found on these, shall be counted as stolen. That's how this is going to work. Laban says, that's a great deal. Good. Let it be as you have said. But then, Laban, playing by house rules, that day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, everyone that had white on it and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. Now, I need to correct something that I've said a couple of times as I've been preaching through this. I've said a couple of times that Laban didn't have any sons. That is bad research on my part. I missed this part where he says sons. So, I'm sorry. Let this be an acknowledgement that I am imperfect and I miss things sometimes. Fortunately, it does not matter. But I did say that he didn't have sons, and he does have sons. So what Laban does, he says, that's a great deal. And then he tells his boys, hey, I'm going to go hang out with Jacob for a minute, and we're going to toast this new arrangement. I want you to go through and steal everything that's his before we get done and take it and move it somewhere else. And we're going to leave him with all the pure white sheep and goats. And you're going to take those and take them 3 days' journey away so they can't breed, and I don't pay him anything. Laban removed all of those that would have been his. In verse 36, he set them a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. Like, you've got a boss like this, right? You got a friend like this. You got a family member like this, that when you finally find a way to nail them down, they're just slippery enough to find another way out. You finally have figured out their game. And then the moment that you do and lock them down, they go to the advanced level of house rules. And you're just infuriated. Can you imagine what it was like for Jacob, who cares for these sheep, who takes care of these sheep every day, who has named these sheep and has sheep that he likes and sheep that he hates and sheep that he doesn't really care about? And he walks outside and he knows how many speckles there are out there. He knows how many stripes there are out there. I'm not going to say he knows how many blacks there are out there. That would be wrong. He knows all those things. And he knows what he's supposed to see when he walks out of the tent. But when he walks out of the tent after having signed that deal, Laban has gotten him again. Like you say, I'm not going to trust that person. I'm not going to trust them. I'm not going to trust them. I'm not going to trust them. And they come to you and they finally got a deal that you can lock down. You finally think you've got it figured out. And the moment you step out of the meeting, they have done it again. And Jacob is broke. So I'm going to skip a few verses here because Jacob does some stuff to try to solve this problem on his own. And he comes outside and he sees the flocks. He sees the stripes and the spots are all gone. And he's left with only the pure whites. And he says, okay, we can figure this out. So he takes them and he shepherds these. But he comes up with a really bonkers folk remedy for this problem. Okay, what he does is he separates the sheep and the goats into the strong ones and the weak ones. And the strong ones he keeps together, and he has them breed together, and he has the weak ones breed together. But he does something else. What he does is he takes some little sticks, and he takes his knife, and he makes little speckles and little stripes on the sticks. And he's like, I got this figured out. I know how to make this work. And he goes over and he sticks the speckled and striped sticks in the water when the strong ones are breeding. And then he takes them out when the weak ones are breeding. And he thinks that if they drink from the water with the speckled sticks in it, that means they're going to have speckled and striped babies. And the ones that drink from the weak ones that drink from just the water with no sticks in it, they're just going to be white. That's how that's going to work. Now this is difficult to talk about for a couple of reasons. First, this doesn't work, okay? That's not how genetics works. You can't stick speckled sticks in drinking water and determine the outcome of the animals that are bred from that. That's not, Isaac, I'm right on that, right? You can't, okay, that's what I thought. You can't, that's not how this works, okay? We got 4-Hers in the room that can confirm. That's not how this works. But they still have more speckled and striped from the strong than they do from the weak. Now, how is that? Does that mean that Isaac's convoluted plan that has nothing to do with reality, that he comes up for himself about how he's going to fix, that works? No, that's not what that means. God took care of him in spite of everything that was said against him. And he spent all his energy scheming and trying to come up with a convoluted plan and how to cheat the cheater. He came up with a plan about how to do that, and God just rolls his eyes and takes care of him anyway. And some of you have got some convoluted schemes that you've worked up about how you're going to get around that boss, about how you're going to get around that person, about how you're going to fix that family member. You've got these convoluted schemes. And if you get this to work, and you just carve the sticks in the right way and put them in their drinking water, they're not going to notice, and everything's going to go the way you want it to. Guys, your convoluted schemes are never going to beat them. But God will take care of you anyway. Jacob's like, I've got a plan. Rachel and Leah are, and maybe the two concubines, who knows, are both after him. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? He says, I've got it under control. I've got sticks. It's going to be fine. And meanwhile, God is taking care of him. In spite of the fact that his plans don't make any sense and they would never work, God cares for him in the midst of a bunch of other people playing house rules. In fact, it works so well that Jacob tells us in chapter 31 that over the next 6 years, as they go with this payment plan, over the next 6 years, Laban changes the agreement 10 times. For a while, it's speckled and striped. And for a while, it's the black ones. And for a while, it's the white ones. And sometimes it's goats. And sometimes it's sheep. And Laban cheats him every time. But every time, God takes care of him. 10 times over 6 years, he works for a guy that lies to him, that cheats him, that plays by house rules. But God honors the fact that Jacob does the right thing, keeps his word, honors God, and even when Jacob tries to take matters into his own hands to solve the problem, God still takes care of him. He takes care of him so well that in verse 43 of chapter 30, says, "Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks and female servants and male servants and camels and donkeys." Like Jacob goes from flat broke, having a guy that's paying him, cheating him so that he can't get paid, and yet at the end of it, he ends up with lots of flocks, big herds, and he's been loaning out money of his own. It goes so well that in chapter 31, verse 1, Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, "Jacob has taken all that was our father's. And from what was our father's, he has gained all his wealth." And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. This thing about Laban regarding him with favor, that Laban actually likes Jacob. Maybe it's because he's a sucker. Maybe that's why he likes him. It's because he knows he can take advantage of him. He likes him because Jacob is a hard worker and brings lots of wealth to him. He likes him, but the moment that Jacob's fortunes turn and now Jacob is getting ahead and Laban is falling behind, he doesn't like him so much anymore. And Jacob is put in a position where he's afraid again for his life. Because the sons of Laban and Laban himself are saying, "Jacob has cheated us." Jacob hadn't cheated anybody. But when the cheaters start to lose, they lash out. When you're playing by house rules, and yet the guy who refuses to play the game starts to win, you get really, really angry. And Jacob will be forced to flee with everything that he has because he's afraid of what they're going to do. But that's next week. Some of you are in the situation that Laban finds himself in. Hopefully you're not. Like I don't deal with that at work. Like it's not an issue for me too much. Some of you are dealing with this at work. And I know you are because you told me you are. And I know that the corporate structure is designed around the idea of get as much as you can and don't get caught and get out before they start issuing warrants, right? That's how that works. And I know some of you have family members that just take advantage of you over and over and over again. And they promise, "I'll do better next time." Or they say, "Well, it was really your fault." Or they say, like, "You just don't know how to play the game. This is how this works. We're family. Aren't you supposed to love people?" And they take advantage of you. And you're faced with this question. Do I follow Jesus? Do I play by the standard rules, the rules in the box, and lose? Or do I play by the house rules so my family that is flat broke at the moment can finally get ahead? but disobey Jesus in the process. And you think those are the only two options. But let me tell you what happened to Jacob. For 14 years, Jacob was broke. But you know what? There's no indication that he ever missed a meal. He slept outside, but it's because that was his job. He had a place to live. He had way more wives than is healthy for a person to have. He had healthy children. And it may have felt like he had nothing, but he had absolutely everything he needed. And when that 14-year period was up, and it seemed like things were finally going to get ahead, but then Laban turns around and moves to advanced level of house rules and now takes away even the opportunity that he thinks he had. You know what happened in that? God prospered him through that and took care of him to the point that the guy who was cheating him was mad at him because he didn't understand how he could win when he was so good at cheating. God has the ability to care for you. The two options are not to play by the standard rules to honor God with how you live and lose, or to play by their rules and disobey God. Those are not the only two options. The third option is to play by the rules that God has given you and trust that whatever He gives you is a win. It's to recognize that if God gives you daily bread, then you have what you need. And if God gives you more than that, then that's wonderful. But your provision and your life does not depend on them and what they do, but it depends entirely on Him. So you ignore them and you play by the rules that He's given you, understanding that you're not going to lose by trusting God. So what do we do in a world where everybody else is playing by house rules? First of all, don't be Laban. If you are somebody that has recognized that you're a sinner and that sin is going to lead you to death and hell, and you trusted Jesus to be the only thing that can rescue you from that and cried out to Him, and He's rescued you and given you new life, you don't get to live and play like them. Because playing like them is what got you into that circumstance in the first place, and the first step of salvation is acknowledging that this isn't working. I know everybody else plays by those rules. And I know it seems like it's a new thing, that it didn't used to be this way. My grandparents used to talk about how things didn't used to be this way, right? You would just shake hands and everybody would keep the agreement, right? We didn't sign any contracts. We just shook hands and everything was fine. I'm sure that was true somewhat, but you know what? In the next breath, they would tell me about the guy up the hill that you don't loan stuff to because he's never going to bring it back. And his daddy was the same way. Like, you can't tell me that it's different than it used to be and then tell me how it's the same as it used to be and me believe you. We are in a broken and fallen world. And this is thousands of years ago, people were still playing by house rules, guys. There is not a dream scenario of when life was perfect other than Eden. And you can't justify your behavior because of the world that you live in, because of the year that you live in, because of the corporation that you work in, because of the way that your family is. You don't get to justify that. Things have been broken since Adam and Eve. And we have to decide how we're going to be without excuses. Don't be Laban. If you're in a position of leadership, lead for the good of the people that you lead and don't worry about the rest of it. Do what Jesus said to do. Don't take advantage of people because that's how culture works at Walmart. That's how culture works at Tyson. That's how culture works in corporate America. I don't care how it works. You are a child of God, rescued from that life. Follow the rules that Jesus has given you and not the rules they lay out for you. Don't be Laban. Secondly, remember that their actions do not excuse your actions. If Jacob said, fine, I'm just going to cheat. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to be like Laban. He didn't keep his word to me. I'm not keeping my word to him. I'm kicking Leah out of my tent because I didn't want her in the first place. This was a trick. She's done, and I don't really care what happens to her. He did this. I'm going to do this. Their actions do not justify your actions. You will not answer to God for their actions. You will answer to God for your actions. And I'm sorry that you're stuck in a situation where everybody else is playing this game. That everybody else is looking to take you down to get themselves ahead. I'm sorry. But their actions do not justify yours. They don't excuse yours. The world that you live in is dictated by God, not by them. So keep your word. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. But they're not going to do it. I don't care what they're going to do. Did you give your word or not? Let your yes be yes and your no be no, and God will take care of the rest. If you give your word, keep your word. Maybe be a little bit more careful about giving your word. Maybe get it in writing. Maybe hang on to those emails. Maybe hang on to those text messages. Maybe take care of yourself. But keep your word, whether they keep theirs or not. Remember that you don't work for them. You work for Jesus. As a child of God, you are called to work as if you were working for Him in whatever circumstance that it is. That means that you do a good job regardless of what everybody else is doing. That you do your job regardless of what everybody else is doing. You do your job regardless of whether anybody's watching you or not. Because you don't work for them, you work for Him. And I don't care who they work for. I care who you work for. You work for Him. And guys, I'm not saying stay in a bad, toxic job with toxic people. I'm not saying that. I'm saying quit or do your job. Because you will answer to God for how you do it. So if you work somewhere, you're in a bad situation and you need to get out of it, quit. Go somewhere else. Do something else. But as long as you're in that job, their behavior is not an excuse for you to not do it. Their behavior is not an excuse for you to quit, for you to not do your job. Either do your job or quit. Don't give your word. Don't agree to things that you're not going to do. You got family members. Let's step back away from work for just a second. You got family members that are constantly taking advantage of you. Jesus does not require, love does not require for you to keep being a sucker. Set some limits, set some boundaries. But if you don't set the boundaries, you have to keep your word, whether they do or not. We answer to Him, not to them. And we don't get to switch to house rules because somebody else took advantage of us. And remember this, God will take care of this. God will take care of you. Like, you don't understand how they are at work. You don't understand how they treat me. You don't understand what it's like when you got somebody above you pushing down. You got somebody below you pushing up. And you got people on either side of you pushing in. And you're just trying to take care of people and do your job. You don't understand what that's like. You don't understand how hard it is to win. I don't. You're right. I don't. A lot of pastors complain about ministry, and there's some things to complain about. But as I watch some of the things that you deal with, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful. I don't understand. But God does. And their pay structure, their cheating, their stealing your bonus does not impact His ability to care for you and provide for you and make sure that you're okay. I don't know a person in this room that's missed a meal recently, unless it's destined trying to on purpose with intermittent fasting. I don't know anybody that's had to sleep outside because they have nowhere else to sleep. I don't know where anybody that's not been able to get the medical care that they needed with the hospitals right around the corner. I don't know of anybody in this room who has trusted God and been taken advantage of and been left hanging. I don't know. Maybe you've not gotten what you deserved. Maybe you've not gotten what was fair. Maybe you got cheated, but you're still doing fine. And if God can care for Jacob, He can care for you. And that evidence is there in the way that He's taken care of you all the way up to this point. Sometimes being taken care of is having enough to eat and a place to sleep. And sometimes being taken care of is getting richer than your boss. I wish I could pick which one you got, but I can't. But the thing I'm confident in is that if you will ignore their games and play by the rules He's laid out, He delights in proving them wrong. He delights in caring for you when you trust in Him. Your schemes, your ways of trying to work things out, none of them are going to come to anything. But He can care for you. So don't be them. Don't allow their actions to excuse your actions. And trust Him to provide. The end of Jacob's story is Jacob having so much wealth, that he had to have dozens of servants to care for it all. And he was able to give away tons of it to his brother to try to make his brother happy so his brother wouldn't kill him when he was done and still have plenty left over. And I'm not saying that if you don't play by their rules, God's going to make you super rich. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that the end of Jacob's story where we learn this lesson is that God provided far more than he needed, despite everything else that happened. And God is able to care for you too. So what will you do? Will you decide, you know what, it's too hard, and I'm going to play by their rules? Or will you trust Him enough to do what He has called you to do in your workplace, with your family, in your neighborhood? What will you do? Will you stand with me as we pray? Lord, I'm so grateful for the story of Jacob, and I know that 3 months ago when I was reading through this, Lord, this is the one that jumped out to me. This is the one that jumped out and said, this is the thing that these people that live in Walmart country, that live in Bentonville and Rogers and Centerton, that work in these corporate cultures and that struggle with these things, this is the one that they need to hear, Lord. I'm grateful that you love us enough to have prepared this for us a long time ago. Lord, I know there are people in this room because they have told me. I know that there are people in this room that are getting pressure from every side to bend. And every time they don't bend, they have people waiting to take advantage of them, waiting to cheat them. And Lord, I know that it is hard for them. I know it's hard for them to stick with what you called them to do. I know that there are people in the room, Lord, that have family members that take advantage of them. They have family members that will just lie to them and use them, and then use you as an excuse to get another chance to do it again. And Lord, I ask for help. I ask for help for those that are struggling with how to be a follower of yours that's being taken advantage of. And I ask today that we would be able to look at the story of Jacob for help. See that Jacob was not perfect. He didn't do everything right. He tried to take some things into his own hands, but he kept his word and honored you. And you kept your promise to him. In spite of the people taking advantage of him, in spite of the cheating by his boss, in spite of how family used him, you cared for him and all those wives and kids. And Lord, let us be people that trust in you to take care of us, that trust in you to determine the outcome, that trust in you. Let us keep our word. Let us do our jobs. Let us play by your rules. And Lord, I ask that others would see the way that we play by the rules and be convicted of their sin. I pray, Lord, that the way that we work for you and keep our word, that it would be evidence of who we are and who you are. And I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.